So to introduce my Commonplace book, I mean, this is just a cover photo, but in general, I am not the most artistic person, so I kind of used it as a Pilgrim at Tinker Creek encyclopedia, where I would have a bunch of all of my CFs on one page and my questions, like the page numbers, all on one page so I could use it in discussion. And then I also took notes on discussions for the most part. So to start, one of the first things I did in my Commonplace book was I just started writing quotes that either intrigued me in some way or I had questions about or that I thought was important to to Dillard herself. For example, I'm as blind as a bat, sensing only from every direction of the echoes with my own thin cries. For that example, I thought it was pretty powerful, but on top of that, I was having trouble interpreting the tone, so I thought I would write it down to be able to come back to it later. Another example is I'm not making chatter, I'm trying to save his life. This is the section where she's talking about the sort of trivia and talking to the one dude, and I sort of had questions about that quote as well. It's my precursor to my questions page. For my second set of pages that I thought would be important to show, it's my CF page. This was amazing to use during discussions. As you can see, some CFs were much more common than others. For example, religion and nature were everywhere throughout the book. And on the other hand, some of the other ones, like attention to trees, I tended to forget about, unfortunately, but it was really helpful. Instead of having to flip through my book for CF pages, I could just go to this initial page. And my question page, I only started doing that, as you can see, past chapter 7, but it was super helpful for discussions where I could just flip right back to the page that I had the question highlighted. So that's basically it for these two pages. And just for an example of some non-Pilgrim at Tinker Creek content in my Commonplace book, I would basically write any sort of reflections on what was done in class that day, anything I thought was important to remember. I also, it's not shown here, but any sort of ideas I had when we were talking about the intros to projects I would write down, and it was just sort of a hub for my ideas to get them all on paper for the day. And for my favorite entry in my Commonplace book, I ended up actually combining the last 3 chapters of Pilgrim at Tinker Creek and the field trip because I did end up doing the Commonplace book a little late. And I basically ended up looking back through the chapters and finding any and all quotes that connected to my experience in the woods. And then I drew little pictures because why not? It's fun. But for example, one night in the summer, I had gone looking for muskrats and was waiting on the long pedestrian bridge over the wildest part of the creek. I happened to find a muskrat as well, so I sort of connected it. And yeah, that's most of it. I have to wrap this up very quickly, but if I had to give a final question that my Commonplace book inspires, it would be how can you use art and organization together?